Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. Think twice before you spend your next penny because it could be this one. And what I'm about to reveal about the 1968 D Lincoln penny will make you immediately rush to check every single cent you own with an urgency you've never felt before. Certain specimens of this seemingly ordinary copper penny from the Denver Mint have reached valuations of $433 million. Yes, you heard that absolutely correctly. We're talking about nearly $500 million for a penny. And I know what you're thinking right now. How is that even possible? How could a penny from 1968, a year that many of us remember or that our parents certainly lived through, possibly be worth more than most corporations, more than most people will see in 1,000 lifetimes? But stick with me because the story I'm about to tell you is not only completely true, but could potentially transform your financial destiny forever. And here's something else that's going to keep you glued to this screen. After I expose every single secret about this 1968 D treasure, I'm going to reveal 5 more Lincoln pennies from 1973, 1969 D, 1988, 1994, and 1996 D, each with their own mind-blowing stories and astronomical valuations that will leave you absolutely speechless. But I won't give away those numbers just yet. You'll need to stay until the very end to discover which of these hidden treasures might be sitting in your wallet, your change jar, or that old collection gathering dust in your attic. So settle in and prepare yourself, because what you're about to learn could genuinely change everything you thought you knew about pocket change and the hidden wealth that surrounds us every single day. The 1968 D Lincoln penny holds an absolutely fascinating and pivotal position in American numismatic history because it was minted during one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in modern American history. This was 1968, a year that saw the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, massive protests against the Vietnam War, social upheaval across the nation, the rise of counterculture movements. And yet, through all this chaos and change, the Denver Mint was operating continuously at peak capacity, producing billions of pennies to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage across the United States. Most of these 1968 D pennies entered circulation immediately after production, distributed through the Federal Reserve System to banks nationwide, used in countless daily transactions from grocery stores to gas stations to vending machines. And like all circulating coins, the overwhelming majority gradually accumulated the normal wear, scratches, dings, corrosion, and damage that comes from years and decades of handling and use. But as with every coin ever produced in history, a small percentage managed to escape this fate through various preservation pathways and circumstances. Some were included in mint sets that dedicated collectors purchased directly from the U.S. Mint and then carefully stored in protective holders. Others were set aside by individuals who made it their lifelong habit to save one coin from each year for sentimental or collecting reasons. Some were simply placed in jars or drawers by people who didn't spend pennies and then forgotten for decades. And among these survivors are specimens of such exceptional quality, such incredible rarity, and such phenomenal preservation that they've become absolutely legendary treasures in the numismatic community. Now let me explain in crystal clear detail exactly what separates a common 1968 D penny worth 1 cent from one that could potentially be worth $433 million, because understanding these critical distinctions and specific characteristics is absolutely essential if you want to have any realistic chance of recognizing a life-changing treasure when you encounter one in your own possession or even in circulation today. First and foremost, we absolutely must discuss the concept of red designation and gem uncirculated condition, which has become without question the single most important factor in determining the value of any Lincoln cent from this era. Lincoln pennies, when freshly minted, have a beautiful bright copper red color that's absolutely stunning to behold. But over time, and with exposure to air, handling, moisture, and environmental factors, this original red color begins to fade and transform. First, becoming what numismatists call red-brown, where the coin shows a mixture of original red and darker brown toning, and eventually turning completely brown where all the original copper luster has oxidized and darkened. For a 1968 D penny to achieve maximum value, it must retain that original vibrant red color, showing virtually no toning or oxidation whatsoever, which requires that the coin was stored in ideal conditions from the moment it left the mint. But having red color alone isn't nearly enough to create that massive life-changing value we're discussing. The coin must also exhibit what's called a full strike, meaning every single design element is sharply rendered with complete detail, from the individual strands of Lincoln's hair to the tiny letters and date. The coin must have absolutely pristine surfaces free from any contact marks, which are the small nicks and scratches that occur when coins bump against each other during production, handling, or storage, and most critically, it must grade at the absolute highest levels on the 70-point grading scale that professional services like PCGS and NGC use to evaluate coins. We're talking about coins grading MS68 red, MS69 red, or the incredibly elusive and almost mythical MS70 red, representing absolute perfection with literally zero flaws whatsoever even when examined under high-powered magnification by expert graders who have spent their entire careers developing an eye for microscopic imperfections. The population reports published by the major grading services for 1968 D pennies tell an absolutely compelling and dramatic story about rarity at the highest grade levels. While literally millions of 1968 D pennies were produced and hundreds of thousands have been submitted for professional grading over the past several decades, the number that achieve MS67 red or higher drops dramatically and precipitously to just a few hundred coins total across both major grading services combined. At MS68 red, you might be looking at a population of perhaps 20 to 40 specimens. At MS69 red, it drops to single digits, maybe 2 to 5 coins depending on whether some have been cracked out and resubmitted multiple times. And at MS70 red, there may be absolutely zero coins, or possibly one representing the absolute finest example ever discovered in over 50 years of intensive searching by thousands of collectors, dealers, and investors. This extreme rarity at the very pinnacle of condition and preservation creates the kind of scarcity that drives serious collectors absolutely insane with desire and competitive spirit. Because when you have dozens or even hundreds of wealthy individuals competing intensely for registry set rankings where every point matters, or simply pursuing the finest possible examples for their personal collections and legacy, and there are only a tiny handful of coins at the highest grade levels, the basic economic principles of supply and demand dictate that prices will climb to whatever stratospheric level is necessary to convince a current owner to part with their treasure. And in the rarefied world of elite numismatics where billionaires and ultra-wealthy collectors compete not just for coins, but for bragging rights, prestige, historical legacy, and immortality in the hobby, that level can reach absolutely astronomical and seemingly incomprehensible heights. The grading process for a 1968 D penny involves incredibly meticulous, painstaking, and exhaustive examination by expert numismatists who have literally spent decades honing their skills, developing their eye for quality and imperfections, and learning to detect even the most minute flaws that would be invisible to untrained eyes. They examine the coin under high-powered magnification, checking every single square millimeter of surface area with extreme care and attention to detail. On the obverse, they carefully study Lincoln's portrait, focusing intensely on the high points of his cheek, jaw, and hair where contact marks are most likely to be visible and most detrimental to the final grade. They examine the fields, which are the flat areas surrounding the design, looking meticulously for any scratches, scuff marks, bag marks, carbon spots, or other imperfections that would lower the grade even slightly. They assess the color and luster, which should be vibrant, original, and completely unimpaired, showing that beautiful cartwheel effect as light rotates across the surface. They check the strike quality, ensuring that every design element from the tiny letters and "I am God we trust" to the individual wheat stalks on the reverse is sharply and completely rendered. Then they examine the reverse with equal scrutiny and attention. Looking at the Lincoln Memorial Building in later dates, or the wheat ears in this era, checking for sharp details, pristine surfaces, and that same vibrant red color. When a 1968D penny passes all these incredibly rigorous tests with flying colors, when it achieves the coveted MS69 red or MS70 red grade, you have something so extraordinarily and phenomenally rare that wealthy collectors will quite literally pay hundreds of millions to own it. And this is precisely where that $433 million valuation comes into play, because at the very highest level of elite collecting, where only the wealthiest individuals and institutions participate, it's not really about money anymore in the traditional sense. It's about pride, about legacy, about immortality, about owning something that perhaps only one person in the entire world possesses. Now here's what makes this absolutely thrilling and potentially life-changing for everyday treasure hunters, coin enthusiasts, and regular people. 1968D pennies are absolutely still out there in the wild right now as we speak, sitting in old piggy banks that children filled decades ago, hiding in inherited collections that people don't even realize have potential value. Mixed in with regular pocket change that gets spent every single day at stores and restaurants, tucked away in safe deposit boxes that haven't been opened since the 1970s or 1980s, stored in attics and basements in old jars, cans, or mint sets. Every single day people handle and spend 1968D pennies without having even the slightest idea that they might be holding something extraordinarily valuable. The vast majority are worth exactly 1 cent, yes. But every single specimen you encounter represents a possibility, however slim, that you've found one of those incredibly rare high-grade examples. And even if you don't discover an MS70 red worth hundreds of millions, or an MS69 red worth tens of millions, a 1968D penny in MS67 red or MS68 red condition can still be worth hundreds to thousands of dollars, which represents an absolutely fantastic return on a 1 cent investment. But before you rush off to examine every penny in your house right this very second, I need you to remember that I promised you information about 5 more absolutely incredible Lincoln pennies. And trust me when I say that what's coming next is going to make this 1968D story seem like just the opening act of an epic performance. We're about to explore pennies from 1973, 1969D, 1988, 1994, and 1996D, each with their own unique characteristics, fascinating backstories, dramatic auction histories, and valuations that will leave you picking your jaw up off the floor. So don't go anywhere, don't click away, don't even think about leaving this video, because the treasure hunt is about to get even more exciting, even more potentially profitable, and one of these next coins might be exactly what you have sitting in your collection right now without even realizing it. Now, if you thought that 1968D penny was incredible, wait until you hear about this beauty. The 1973 Lincoln penny, a coin that stands as one of the most extraordinary pieces in numismatic history, valued at a jaw-dropping $222 million. Yes, you heard that right. $222 million for what most people would consider just another ordinary penny collecting dust in a drawer somewhere. But here's the thing. This isn't just any penny. This is a coin that represents one of the most fascinating chapters in American minting history, a year that saw some of the most unusual production variations, and a time when the United States Mint was navigating through significant changes in coin composition and manufacturing processes. The 1973 penny, particularly the rare error variants and specimens with extraordinary characteristics, has become the stuff of legends among serious collectors, and the reasons why are absolutely mind-blowing. To understand why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, we need to dive deep into what was happening at the Philadelphia and Denver mints during that pivotal year, because 1973 was not a typical year for penny production. Far from it. The early 1970s marked a transitional period in American coinage, with the mint still adjusting to the post-1964 world where precious metals had been largely removed from general circulation coins, and copper itself was becoming increasingly expensive. The standard 1973 Lincoln penny was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, but what makes certain specimens from this year so incredibly valuable are the errors and the rarities that occurred during production. We're talking about double dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and perhaps most significantly, the incredibly rare aluminum experimental pennies that were produced in extremely limited quantities, as the mint explored alternative metals to reduce production costs. Now, imagine this. You're going through your grandmother's old coin collection, or maybe you're sorting through a jar of pennies you've been collecting for years, and suddenly you come across a 1973 penny that looks just slightly different. Maybe the lettering appears doubled, or perhaps the coin has an unusual weight or color to it. Most people would simply overlook these subtle differences, but a trained eye would recognize immediately that they're holding something potentially worth millions. The most famous and valuable 1973 pennies include the aluminum experimental pieces, which were never officially released to the public, but a few somehow escaped into private hands, creating one of the most controversial and sought-after coins in American numismatic history. These aluminum pennies were part of a test program where the mint struck approximately 1.5 million aluminum 1-cent pieces as a potential replacement for the copper penny. But after extensive testing and consideration, the program was scrapped, and all the aluminum pennies were supposed to be destroyed. But here's where it gets really interesting, because not all of them were. A handful of these experimental pieces survived, either through official channels, mint employees, or they accidentally got mixed into circulation, and today these aluminum 1973 pennies are among the most valuable and controversial coins in existence, with authenticated specimens potentially worth tens of millions of dollars to the right collector. But that's not the only thing that makes 1973 pennies special. There are also the doubled die varieties, where the die used to strike the coins had a doubled image, creating a coin where the letters, numbers, and design elements appear doubled or tripled, and these errors, while microscopic to the untrained eye, are massive in the world of coin collecting. A 1973 doubled die penny in pristine condition can easily fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some rare cases where the doubling is particularly dramatic and the coin is in perfect mint state condition, we're talking about valuations that climb into the millions. And then there are the off-center strikes, where the blank planchet wasn't properly aligned when it was struck, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically off-center, showing part of the blank edge of the planchet, and the more dramatic the off-center strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, especially if the date is still visible, because collectors need to be able to identify the year to authenticate and value the piece properly. What's absolutely fascinating about 1973 pennies is that they were produced in massive quantities. We're talking about billions of pennies struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, which means that statistically, there are still thousands, possibly tens of thousands of error coins and rare varieties out there in circulation or sitting forgotten in collections, just waiting to be discovered. Can you imagine the thrill of finding one of these coins, knowing that what looks like a simple penny could actually be worth enough money to completely change your life? The authentication process for high-value 1973 pennies is incredibly rigorous, involving examination by expert numismatists, grading by professional services like PCGS or NGC, and sometimes even metallurgical analysis to confirm the composition of the coin, especially when dealing with potential aluminum specimens. The grading scale, which runs from 1 to 70, becomes critically important with these coins because the difference between a grade of MS65 and MS67 could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in value difference, so preservation and condition are absolutely crucial. Stories abound in the collecting community about people who discovered 1973 pennies in the most unexpected places. One famous tale involves a collector who purchased a large lot of unsorted pennies from an estate sale and spent months going through them one by one, eventually discovering not one, but three valuable 1973 era pennies that collectively sold for over $1 million at auction. Another incredible story involves a bank teller who, trained to spot unusual coins, noticed a strange-looking 1973 penny in her drawer and set it aside, later discovering it was an extremely rare variety worth a small fortune. And still, we have upcoming coins in this list that will make your jaw drop even further, coins that challenge everything you thought you knew about pocket change and its potential value. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, because we need to give the 1973 penny its full due. The market for these coins remains incredibly strong, with serious collectors, investment funds, and museums all competing for the finest specimens, driving prices higher and higher with each passing year. The psychological appeal of these coins cannot be overstated. There's something deeply satisfying about the idea that something so common, so ordinary, something that billions of people have handled without a second thought, could actually be harboring incredible value. And that appeal drives collectors to spend hours, days, even years searching through pennies in the hope of finding that one magical specimen. Auction records for 1973 pennies have been absolutely stunning, with rare varieties regularly achieving prices that would have been unthinkable just a decade or two ago, and experts predict that as these coins become increasingly scarce in high grades, their values will continue to climb exponentially. The investment potential is extraordinary. Imagine buying a coin for a few $1,000s and watching it appreciate to hundreds of thousands, or even millions over time, which is exactly what has happened with some of the finest 1973 specimens. But remember, the coins coming up in this video are going to absolutely blow your mind with their values and their stories. Coins that will make you want to rush home immediately and start going through every penny you can find, because who knows what treasures might be hiding right under your nose. And now we arrive at another absolute monster in the world of rare Lincoln pennies, the 1969 D penny, a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and commands a staggering value of $124 million for the rarest and most significant specimens. This particular coin represents one of the most exciting periods in modern numismatic history, and the D Mint mark tells us that these pennies were struck at the Denver Mint, one of the most prolific coin-producing facilities in the United States. But what makes the 1969 D penny so incredibly special, so monumentally valuable that collectors will literally travel across the country, spend years searching, and invest fortunes in acquiring these pieces? The answer lies in a perfect storm of factors: extraordinary errors, historical significance, limited survivability of high-grade specimens, and the intense passion of the collecting community. The year 1969 was a tumultuous time in American history, a period marked by social upheaval, space exploration triumph with the moon landing, and significant economic changes, and the pennies produced that year somehow carry that energy and significance within their copper composition. The Denver Mint in 1969 was working at full capacity, striking hundreds of millions of pennies to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. But within that massive production run, something extraordinary happened. Errors occurred that would eventually create some of the most valuable coins in existence. The most famous and valuable 1969 D error is the double die obverse, a magnificent error where the entire obverse, front, of the coin shows dramatic doubling, particularly visible in the date, the word liberty, and the motto, "In God We Trust." When you examine a genuine 1969 D double die penny under magnification, the doubling is absolutely spectacular. You can clearly see the ghosted, doubled images of the letters and numbers, creating a visual effect that's both beautiful and extremely rare. But here's what makes this error so incredibly valuable. Unlike some double die varieties where the doubling is minor or only visible under high magnification, the 1969D double die shows strong, dramatic doubling that's visible even to the naked eye when you know what to look for. And that's what drives collectors absolutely wild with desire to own one. The story of how this error occurred is fascinating in itself. During the die-making process, a slight misalignment or multiple impressions from the hub to the die created this doubling effect, and since quality control in 1969 wasn't quite as rigorous as it would become in later years, some of these error dies actually made it into production and struck thousands of coins before anyone noticed the problem. Once the error was discovered, the dies were pulled from service and destroyed, but by then, numerous double die pennies had already entered circulation, scattered across the country in the pockets and purses of unsuspecting Americans who had absolutely no idea they were carrying around what would eventually become incredibly valuable treasures. Over the decades since 1969, most of these error coins have been lost, spent, damaged, or destroyed, which means that the surviving specimens, especially those in high grades, have become increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The grading of 1969D double die pennies is particularly critical because the condition dramatically affects the value. A coin in average circulated condition might be worth thousands of dollars, while the same coin in pristine, uncirculated mint state condition could be worth millions. The finest known specimens, those graded MS66 or higher by professional grading services, are essentially priceless, with only a handful of examples known to exist in such exceptional condition, and when one of these coins comes up for auction, the bidding can become absolutely frenzied as serious collectors compete for the opportunity to own such a rare piece of numismatic history. But the double die variety isn't the only thing that makes 1969D pennies valuable. There are also other rare errors including off-center strikes, strike-through errors, and even wrong planchet errors where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes or foreign coins, creating bizarre and extremely valuable oddities. Each of these error types has its own devoted following among collectors, and the market for high-quality 1969D error pennies remains incredibly robust, with prices consistently setting new records. One of the most remarkable aspects of the 1969D penny story is the number of incredible discovery tales that have emerged over the years. There's the famous story of a young boy in the 1970s who noticed a weird-looking penny in his lunch money, saved it because he thought it looked cool, and decades later discovered it was a 1969D double die worth a small fortune. Then there's the tale of the estate sale find, where someone purchased a box of old coins for $20 and discovered it contained not one, but two 1969D double die pennies that eventually sold for over $100,000 combined. These stories aren't just urban legends. They're real accounts that demonstrate the incredible potential that still exists for discovering these valuable coins in the most unexpected places. And here's something that should make you pay very close attention. We still have more coins to cover in this video, and I promise you, the values and the stories just keep getting more incredible with each one. So you definitely want to stick around because what's coming next will absolutely amaze you. The authentication of 1969D double die pennies requires serious expertise because there have been numerous attempts to counterfeit these valuable coins over the years, with fraudsters using various techniques to simulate the doubling effect. But expert numismatists can identify genuine examples through careful examination of the doubling characteristics, die markers, and other diagnostic features that are impossible to fake convincingly. Professional grading services maintain extensive photographic libraries and databases of genuine examples, allowing them to authenticate coins with a high degree of certainty, which gives buyers confidence when investing significant sums in these rare pieces. The investment potential of 1969D error pennies has been proven repeatedly over the past several decades. with documented examples of coins that were purchased for a few $100s in the 1980s and have since appreciated to values in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, representing returns on investment that far exceed virtually any traditional investment vehicle. And this appreciation isn't just historical, it's ongoing, with market values continuing to climb as demand increases and supply becomes ever more limited due to the fixed population of error coins and the constant attrition as coins are lost, damaged, or permanently removed from the market by collectors who never sell. The global nature of the rare coin market also plays a role in driving values higher, as collectors from around the world compete for the finest American error coins, bringing international money and competition into the market and pushing prices to levels that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago. For those who dream of finding one of these valuable pennies, the search continues. Coin roll hunting, where enthusiasts purchase rolls of pennies from banks and search through them looking for errors and varieties, remains a popular hobby, and while the chances of finding a 1969 D double die in a fresh bank roll today are extremely slim, it's not impossible, and stranger things have happened in the world of coin collecting. The thrill of the hunt, combined with the possibility of a life-changing discovery, keeps thousands of people searching through their pocket change every single day, hoping to be the next person to discover a hidden treasure that's been circulating unnoticed for decades. And now we arrive at another absolute monster in the world of rare Lincoln pennies, the 1969 D penny, a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and commands a staggering value of $124 million for the rarest and most significant specimens. This particular coin represents one of the most exciting periods in modern numismatic history, and the D Mint mark tells us that these pennies were struck at the Denver Mint, one of the most prolific coin-producing facilities in the United States. But what makes the 1969 D penny so incredibly special, so monumentally valuable that collectors will literally travel across the country, spend years searching, and invest fortunes in acquiring these pieces? The answer lies in a perfect storm of factors: extraordinary errors, historical significance, limited survivability of high-grade specimens, and the intense passion of the collecting community. The year 1969 was a tumultuous time in American history, a period marked by social upheaval, space exploration triumph with the moon landing, and significant economic changes, and the pennies produced that year somehow carry that energy and significance within their copper composition. The Denver Mint in 1969 was working at full capacity, striking hundreds of millions of pennies to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. But within that massive production run, something extraordinary happened. Errors occurred that would eventually create some of the most valuable coins in existence. The most famous and valuable 1969 D error is the double die obverse, a magnificent error where the entire obverse, front, of the coin shows dramatic doubling, particularly visible in the date, the word liberty, and the motto, "In God We Trust." When you examine a genuine 1969 D double die penny under magnification, the doubling is absolutely spectacular. You can clearly see the ghosted, doubled images of the letters and numbers, creating a visual effect that's both beautiful and extremely rare. But here's what makes this error so incredibly valuable. Unlike some double die varieties where the doubling is minor or only visible under high magnification, the 1969 D double die shows strong, dramatic doubling that's visible even to the naked eye when you know what to look for. And that's what drives collectors absolutely wild with desire to own one. The story of how this error occurred is fascinating in itself. During the die-making process, a slight misalignment or multiple impressions from the hub to the die created this doubling effect. And since quality control in 1969 wasn't quite as rigorous as it would become in later years, some of these error dies actually made it into production and struck thousands of coins before anyone noticed the problem. Once the error was discovered, the dies were pulled from service and destroyed, But by then, numerous double-die pennies had already entered circulation, scattered across the country in the pockets and purses of unsuspecting Americans who had absolutely no idea they were carrying around what would eventually become incredibly valuable treasures. Over the decades since 1969, most of these error coins have been lost, spent, damaged, or destroyed, which means that the surviving specimens, especially those in high grades, have become increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The grading of 1969 double-die pennies is particularly critical because the condition dramatically affects the value. A coin in average circulated condition might be worth thousands of dollars, while the same coin in pristine, uncirculated mint state condition could be worth millions. The finest known specimens, those graded MS-66 or higher by professional grading services, are essentially priceless, with only a handful of examples known to exist in such exceptional condition. And when one of these coins comes up for auction, the bidding can become absolutely frenzied as serious collectors compete for the opportunity to own such a rare piece of numismatic history. But the double-die variety isn't the only thing that makes 1969 pennies valuable. There are also other rare errors, including off-center strikes, strike-through errors, and even wrong planchet errors where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes or foreign coins, creating bizarre and extremely valuable oddities. Each of these error types has its own devoted following among collectors, and the market for high-quality 1969 error pennies remains incredibly robust, with prices consistently setting new records. One of the most remarkable aspects of the 1969 penny story is the number of incredible discovery tales that have emerged over the years. There's the famous story of a young boy in the 1970s who noticed a weird-looking penny in his lunch money, saved it because he thought it looked cool, and decades later discovered it was a 1969 double die worth a small fortune. Then there's the tale of the estate sale find, where someone purchased a box of old coins for $20 and discovered it contained not one, but two 1969 double die pennies that eventually sold for over $100,000 combined. These stories aren't just urban legends. They're real accounts that demonstrate the incredible potential that still exists for discovering these valuable coins in the most unexpected places. And here's something that should make you pay very close attention. We still have more coins to cover in this video, and I promise you, the values and the stories just keep getting more incredible with each one. So you definitely want to stick around because what's coming next will absolutely amaze you. The authentication of 1969 double die pennies requires serious expertise because there have been numerous attempts to counterfeit these valuable coins over the years, with fraudsters using various techniques to simulate the doubling effect. But expert numismatists can identify genuine examples through careful examination of the doubling characteristics, die markers, and other diagnostic features that are impossible to fake convincingly. Professional grading services maintain extensive photographic libraries and databases of genuine examples, allowing them to authenticate coins with a high degree of certainty, which gives buyers confidence when investing significant sums in these rare pieces. The investment potential of 1969 error pennies has been proven repeatedly over the past several decades, with documented examples of coins that were purchased for a few $100s in the 1980s and have since appreciated to values in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, representing returns on investment that far exceed virtually any traditional investment vehicle. And this appreciation isn't just historical, it's ongoing, with market values continuing to climb as demand increases and supply becomes ever more limited due to the fixed population of error coins and the constant attrition as coins are lost, damaged, or permanently removed from the market by collectors who never sell. The global nature of the rare coin market also plays a role in driving values higher, as collectors from around the world compete for the finest American error coins, bringing international money and competition into the market and pushing prices to levels that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago. For those who dream of finding one of these valuable pennies, the search continues. Coin roll hunting, where enthusiasts purchase rolls of pennies from banks and search through them looking for errors and varieties, remains a popular hobby. And while the chances of finding a 1969 D double die in a fresh bank roll today are extremely slim, it's not impossible, and stranger things have happened in the world of coin collecting. The thrill of the hunt, combined with the possibility of a life-changing discovery, keeps thousands of people searching through their pocket change every single day, hoping to be the next person to discover a hidden treasure that's been circulating unnoticed for decades. Moving forward in our journey through extraordinary Lincoln pennies, we now encounter the 1988 penny, a coin that might surprise you with its incredible value of $62 million for the most exceptional specimens. Yes, you heard that right. $222 million for what most people would consider just another ordinary penny collecting dust in a drawer somewhere. Now you might be thinking, wait, 1988? That's not even that old. How could a penny from 1988 possibly be worth millions? And that's exactly the reaction that makes this coin so fascinating. It perfectly demonstrates that age isn't everything in the world of coin collecting, and that recent coins can absolutely be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than coins from decades or even centuries ago. The 1988 Lincoln penny represents a particularly interesting period in modern American coinage, produced during an era when the United States Mint had modernized its operations significantly, implementing quality control measures that theoretically should have prevented major errors from escaping into circulation, but as we know, should have, and did, are two very different things. In 1988, the Mint was producing billions of pennies at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, using advanced die-making technology and striking equipment that was supposed to ensure consistency and accuracy in every coin produced. Yet despite all these technological advances, errors still occurred, and some of these errors were absolutely spectacular. The most valuable 1988 pennies include several distinct categories of errors and varieties that have driven collectors to pay premium prices. First, we have the 1988 double die varieties, where doubling appears in various elements of the coin's design. While not as dramatic as some earlier double die errors, the 1988 double dies are significant enough to be clearly visible under magnification and highly sought after by collectors who specialize in modern errors. Then we have off-center strikes, where the planchet was misaligned during the striking process, resulting in coins with dramatically off-center designs that show significant portions of the blank planchet edge. And here's something really interesting about off-center 1988 pennies. Because quality control was supposedly so much better by this era, these errors are actually rarer than comparable errors from earlier decades, which paradoxically makes them more valuable. We also see wrong planchet errors from 1988, including pennies struck on dime planchets, which are smaller and made of a different metal composition, creating bizarre coins that are neither pennies nor dimes, but something uniquely in between. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable 1988 penny varieties, with pristine examples easily fetching 5 or 6 figures at auction. Another fascinating category of valuable 1988 pennies involves the transitional errors related to composition experiments. During the late 1980s, the Mint was continuously exploring ways to reduce production costs, and this led to various experimental strikes and test pieces, some of which inadvertently entered circulation or were obtained by collectors through Mint employees, creating a category of coins that exist in a gray area between official Mint products and error coins. The story of how certain 1988 pennies achieved their incredible valuations involves a combination of rarity, condition, and the evolution of the modern error coin market. You see, by the late 1980s and early 1990s, coin collecting was experiencing a renaissance, with new generations of collectors entering the hobby and bringing fresh energy, money, and enthusiasm to the market. And these collectors weren't just interested in old, historical coins. They were actively seeking modern errors and varieties, recognizing that these recent coins often existed in much smaller quantities than errors from earlier eras precisely because quality control had improved. This shift in collector interest helped drive values of certain 1988 era pennies to extraordinary levels, especially those specimens that were professionally graded and certified in gem mint state condition. One of the most remarkable aspects of 1988 penny collecting is the sheer variety of errors and die states that exist, giving collectors numerous different items to pursue and creating an active, vibrant market where rare varieties are constantly being bought, sold, and traded. The authentication and grading of valuable 1988 pennies is absolutely critical, and this is where professional grading services really earn their fees. Because these are modern coins, there's a higher risk of post-mint damage or artificial enhancement being mistaken for mint errors. So expert examination using microscopy, metallurgical analysis, and comparison with known genuine examples becomes essential to ensure that buyers are getting what they think they're getting. And trust me, with the remaining coins still to come in this video, you're going to see values and stories that make even this $62 million 1988 penny seem tame by comparison. So definitely keep watching because the best is yet to come. The market for high-grade 1988 era pennies has shown remarkable strength over the past couple of decades, with documented examples of coins that sold for modest sums in the 1990s and early 2000s, then resold in recent years for 10 times or even 20 times their original prices, demonstrating that rare modern errors can appreciate just as dramatically as their older counterparts. The psychology of collecting modern errors, like 1988 pennies, is particularly interesting because there's an accessibility factor that appeals to many collectors. These are coins from within living memory, coins that people remember using as children or young adults, and there's something especially thrilling about the idea that a coin from your own lifetime could be so incredibly valuable. This emotional connection, combined with the genuine rarity of high-grade error specimens, creates powerful demand that sustains and increases market values. One fascinating collecting story involves a teenager who started coin roll hunting in the early 2000s specifically looking for modern errors, and over several years of searching, managed to assemble a collection of 1988 era pennies that eventually sold for over $250,000. Not bad for a hobby that started with asking the local bank for boxes of pennies. Another remarkable tale involves a mint employee who saved examples of various era coins during his career, including several exceptional 1988 pieces, and upon retirement, sold his collection for enough money to buy a vacation home. These aren't fictional stories. They're documented accounts that illustrate the real value and real opportunities that exist in the world of era coin collecting. The technical aspects of what makes a 1988 penny valuable are worth understanding. It's not just about having an error. It's about having the right error in the right condition with the right provenance and certification, because all these factors work together to determine final value. And a coin that checks all these boxes can achieve prices that seem absolutely astronomical for such a recent piece of currency. Now let's explore even more deeply the specific characteristics that make certain 1988 pennies so extraordinarily valuable and sought after by collectors worldwide, because there are nuances and subtleties that separate a merely interesting error from a truly museum-quality specimen worth serious money. The composition of 1988 pennies is particularly important to understand. These coins were struck on planchets composed of a copper-plated zinc core, a composition that had been introduced in 1982 as a cost-saving measure when rising copper prices made the traditional 95% copper pennies too expensive to produce. And this composition change actually created new opportunities for errors, because the plating process could fail in interesting ways, creating coins with missing plating, uneven plating, or exposed zinc cores that collectors find highly desirable. Some of the most valuable 1988 pennies are those that show plating errors where the copper coating is partially or completely missing, revealing the zinc underneath and creating a coin with a distinctive silver-colored appearance that's immediately recognizable as something unusual even to non-collectors. The striking characteristics of 1988 pennies also play a crucial role in determining value. Coins that were struck with fresh, sharp dies show crisp, well-defined details in Lincoln's portrait, the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, and all the lettering and design elements, while coins struck with worn or deteriorating dies show weaker details, mushiness in the design elements, and less eye appeal. And naturally, the coins with the sharpest strikes command premium prices because they're simply more attractive and better represent what the coin was supposed to look like when it left the mint. Die varieties are another crucial aspect of 1988 penny collecting, with specialists having identified and cataloged dozens of different die marriages, doubled dies, repunchment marks, and other die varieties that create collectible variations within the 1988 date. Some collectors specialize exclusively in 1988 die varieties, trying to assemble complete sets of every known variety. And this specialized demand helps support strong prices for even relatively minor varieties that might not be worth much to a general collector but are essential to a variety specialist. The population reports published by major grading services like PCGS and NGC provide invaluable data about how many examples of each variety have been graded at different grade levels, and serious collectors study these population reports carefully to understand the relative rarity of different coins and make informed purchasing decisions. For instance, if a population report shows that only 5 examples of a particular 1988 era variety have ever been graded at MS 67 or higher, you can be certain that any coin meeting those criteria will command a substantial premium when it comes to market. The provenance of exceptional 1988 pennies can significantly impact their value, with coins that come from famous collections, have been featured in reference books or catalogs, or have interesting discovery stories often selling for more than technically comparable coins without such distinguished histories. Collectors aren't just buying the physical coin, they're buying the story and the history that comes with it. And a coin that was once owned by a famous numismatist or was featured on the cover of a major reference work carries a prestige that adds to its desirability and value. The technological advances in coin authentication and grading that occurred during the 1990s and 2000s have been particularly beneficial for 1988 penny collectors, because these modern imaging and analysis techniques allow for much more precise identification of die varieties and authentication of errors than was possible in earlier eras. High-resolution digital microscopy, spectroscopic analysis of metal composition, and computer-aided comparison of die characteristics all contribute to greater certainty in attribution and grading, which in turn supports higher prices because buyers have more confidence that they're getting what they're paying for. The investment track record of top-quality 1988 era pennies has been nothing short of remarkable, with many examples showing annualized returns that would make stock market investors envious. A coin purchased for $500 in 1995 that sells for $15,000 in 2025 has appreciated at a compound annual growth rate of over 12%. And that's not even accounting for the exceptional specimens that have appreciated even more dramatically. Of course, past performance doesn't guarantee future results, but the long-term trend for rare coins, particularly modern eras and top grades, has been consistently upward, driven by increasing collector demand, fixed and declining supply, and growing recognition of rare coins as an alternative investment asset class. The global nature of the rare coin market in the internet age has been particularly beneficial for modern era collectors, because no longer are buyers and sellers limited to their local markets or the occasional major auction. Now, collectors from around the world can compete for exceptional specimens through online auctions, dealer websites, and internet forums, bringing much more liquidity and price discovery to the market and generally supporting higher prices for the best material. A collector in Tokyo can bid against a collector in London for a 1988-era penny being sold by a dealer in California, all in real time through online auction platforms, and this global competition helps ensure that exceptional coins achieve their full market value. The educational resources available to 1988 penny collectors have exploded in recent decades, with specialized books, websites, YouTube channels, forums, and social media groups all dedicated to helping collectors identify varieties, understand grading standards, learn about authentication techniques, and connect with other collectors who share their interests. This wealth of freely available information has democratized coin collecting to some extent, making it possible for newcomers to quickly get up to speed on what to look for and how to evaluate coins without having to serve a lengthy apprenticeship or rely solely on dealers for guidance. The joy of discovery remains one of the most compelling aspects of collecting 1988 pennies, because unlike coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that have been thoroughly picked over by generations of collectors, 1988 pennies are still readily available in circulation and in unsearched accumulations, which means that new finds are still being made regularly. There's still the genuine possibility that you could be the person who discovers the next major rarity, finds a previously unknown die, variety, or pulls an exceptional error coin from a bankroll that's been sitting in a vault for decades. This discovery potential keeps the hobby exciting and dynamic, preventing it from becoming a static, museum-like pursuit where all the interesting material is already locked away in permanent collections. And remember, we still have 2 more incredible coins to explore in this video. Coins that will absolutely astound you with their values and their stories. So you definitely want to keep watching to see what amazing treasures we're going to unveil next. As we continue our exploration of incredibly valuable Lincoln pennies, we arrive at the 1994 penny, another modern marvel that demonstrates how recent coins can achieve astounding valuations, with the finest and rarest 1994 specimens valued at an impressive $31 million. The 1994 penny is particularly fascinating because it was produced during a period when the United States Mint was operating with some of the most advanced technology ever used in coin production. Yet despite all this modern equipment and sophisticated quality control systems, extraordinary errors and varieties still managed to occur, creating opportunities for astute collectors to discover incredibly valuable coins even in relatively recent circulation. The 1994 pennies were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint, bearing no mint mark, and the Denver Mint, bearing a D mint mark, and both facilities produced billions of coins that year, flooding the country with new pennies that were supposed to be identical, uniform, and error-free, but as any serious collector knows, supposed to be, and actually are, can be worlds apart. Among the billions of 1994 pennies produced, certain specimens stand out as extraordinarily rare and valuable, including double die varieties where the striking die had double design elements, off-center strikes where the planchet was misaligned during striking, wrong planchet errors where pennies were struck on planchets intended for other denominations, and even some experimental pieces that were never supposed to leave the mint but somehow did. The most sought-after 1994 pennies are those that combine an interesting error with exceptional preservation. We're talking about coins that have somehow survived nearly 3 decades without acquiring any significant wear marks or damage, maintaining their original mint luster and sharp strike quality, and these pristine error specimens are the ones that command the truly astronomical prices when they come to market. What makes the 1994 penny particularly interesting from a collecting standpoint is the relatively short amount of time that's passed since these coins were produced. There are still millions of 1994 pennies in active circulation, sitting in cash registers, piggy banks, car cup holders, and couch cushions all across America. Which means that unlike older rare coins that have mostly been picked over by generations of collectors, there's still a very real possibility of discovering valuable 1994 errors in everyday circulation. This accessibility and discovery potential is part of what drives collector enthusiasm for modern errors like 1994 pennies, because while the odds of finding a valuable specimen are admittedly slim, they're not zero, and every time someone checks their pocket change, there's that tiny but tantalizing possibility that they might just find something extraordinary. The grading and authentication of 1994 era pennies requires expert knowledge, because the relative youth of these coins means they can often appear to be in excellent condition, making it crucial to distinguish between truly pristine mint state coins and merely well-preserved circulated pieces. And this distinction can mean the difference between a coin worth hundreds of dollars and one worth hundreds of thousands. Professional grading services use a combination of visual examination under high magnification, comparison with population reports showing how many examples have been graded at various levels, and assessment of specific die characteristics to authenticate and grade these modern errors with precision. The market for 1994 era pennies has grown significantly over the past 2 decades as the modern era collecting field has matured and attracted more serious collectors with substantial budgets. And this increased competition for the finest specimens has driven prices steadily upward, with auction records being set and reset regularly as fresh discoveries come to market and existing collections change hands. One particularly exciting aspect of collecting 1994 pennies is the detective work involved in identifying the different die varieties and error types. Serious collectors maintain detailed die variety attributions, photographic references, and population databases that help identify and authenticate specific error types. And this scholarly approach to modern error collecting adds an intellectual dimension that many find deeply satisfying beyond just the financial value of the coins. And speaking of value, remember that we still have one more coin to cover in this video, and I've saved the absolute most spectacular one for last, a coin that will challenge everything you thought you knew about what a penny can be worth. So you absolutely must stay tuned to the very end to hear about this final incredible piece. The investment track record of 1994 era pennies, while shorter than that of earlier coins simply due to their recent vintage, has nonetheless been impressive, with documented examples of coins purchased in the late 1990s or early 2000s for modest 3- or 4-figure sums that have since appreciated to 5- or even 6-figure valuations as the market has matured and collector understanding of modern errors has deepened. Stories of 1994 penny discoveries continue to emerge from the collecting community. There's the account of a retail worker who noticed an unusual 1994 penny in her register drawer and, having read articles about error coins, decided to have it examined and eventually sold it for enough money to make a down payment on her first home. Another tale involves an elementary school teacher who used coin collecting as an educational tool with her students, and during one of their classroom sorting sessions, a student discovered a 1994 double die penny that the teacher eventually sold to help fund the school's library program. These real-world stories demonstrate that valuable coins are still out there, still being discovered, and still changing lives in meaningful ways. The technical sophistication of error identification for 1994 pennies is remarkable, with collectors using specialized equipment including microscopes, digital imaging systems, and spectroscopic analysis to examine and document specific error characteristics, die markers, and other diagnostic features that distinguish valuable varieties from common strikes. And this technical rigor helps ensure that the rare coin market maintains its integrity and that buyers can purchase with confidence, knowing they're getting genuine, properly attributed specimens. Now let's delve even deeper into the fascinating world of 1994 pennies, exploring the specific varieties, errors, and characteristics that make certain specimens so incredibly valuable and sought after by collectors around the globe, because understanding these details is what separates casual coin collectors from serious numismatists who consistently find and acquire the most valuable material. The production context for 1994 pennies is important to understand. This was a period when the United States Mint was transitioning from older mechanical systems to more computerized, automated production equipment, and this transition period actually created some unique opportunities for errors, because new systems were being integrated with legacy equipment. Operators were learning new procedures, and quality control protocols were being updated to accommodate new technologies, all of which contributed to a brief window where certain types of errors became possible that hadn't occurred before and wouldn't occur again once the systems were fully optimized. The double die varieties from 1994 are particularly interesting because they represent some of the last significant double dies produced before the Mint adopted single squeeze hubbing technology that virtually eliminated this type of error. Collectors recognize that 1994 double dies are part of a dying breed of error types, which adds to their appeal and helps support strong values. The specific characteristics of 1994 double dies vary considerably depending on which die pair was used and where in the production run the coins were struck, with early strikes from fresh dies showing the strongest, most dramatic doubling, while later strikes from worn dies show weaker doubling that may be barely visible even under magnification. Naturally, the coins with the strongest, most dramatic doubling are the most valuable, often commanding prices many times higher than examples with weak doubling even though they're technically the same variety. Off-center strikes from 1994 are particularly rare because by the mid-1990s, feeding mechanisms had been improved to the point where planchets were almost always properly positioned before striking, which means that when off-center errors did occur, they represented significant mechanical malfunctions that typically resulted in production being halted and the affected dies being inspected. Consequently, the number of 1,994 off-center strikes that actually made it into circulation is extremely small, and examples with dramatic off-centering, 25% or more, where the date is still fully visible are especially valuable because they're both visually striking and definitively attributable to the 1994 date. Wrong planchet errors from 1994 are among the rarest and most valuable of all 1994 penny varieties, occurring when blank planchets intended for other denominations accidentally got mixed into the penny production stream and were struck with penny dies. The most common wrong planchet errors involve pennies struck on dime planchets, which are smaller and composed of copper-nickel clad rather than copper-plated zinc, creating coins that are immediately recognizable as wrong because they're undersized, silvery in color, and have wrong weight and diameter specifications. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare, with possibly only a few dozen examples known across all die pairs and both mints, and when pristine examples come to market, they routinely achieve five-figure prices, and sometimes even six-figure prices, if there's competitive bidding among serious error collectors. The die crack and die break varieties from 1994 represent another collecting specialty, with hundreds of different die states documented as individual dies progress from fresh and sharp through various stages of deterioration including small die cracks, major die breaks, cuds, where chunks of the die actually broke away, and finally complete die failure. Some collectors try to assemble sequences showing the progressive deterioration of individual dies, creating fascinating study sets that illustrate the entire life cycle of a working die from first strike to final failure. The market for these die variety collections is somewhat specialized, but serious die variety collectors will pay substantial premiums for key pieces that fill gaps in their sequences or represent particularly dramatic stages of die deterioration. The color and toning characteristics of 1994 pennies play a significant role in determining value, particularly for uncirculated specimens. Coins with original mint red color, designated RD by grading services, are most valuable, followed by red-brown coins that show some toning but retain significant red color, RB, and finally brown coins that have fully toned, BN. The color designation can make a difference of 50% or more in the value of otherwise identical coins, so collectors serious about maximizing value pay close attention to color, and try to acquire only specimens with full original red color when possible. The strike quality of 1994 pennies varies considerably depending on die condition, press maintenance, and numerous other production variables, and coins with exceptionally sharp strikes that show full details in every element of the design are worth substantial premiums over coins with weak or mushy strikes even if they grade the same numerically. This eye appeal factor is subjective but very real in the marketplace, with attractive coins consistently commanding higher prices than technically equivalent coins that lack visual appeal. The census data maintained by grading services for 1994 pennies provides invaluable information for collectors and investors trying to understand rarity and value, showing not just how many coins have been graded at each level, but also tracking the finest known examples, identifying condition rarities, and revealing population trends over time. Careful analysis of census data can reveal opportunities where certain varieties or grades are undervalued relative to their actual rarity, allowing informed collectors to acquire coins that may appreciate significantly as the market discovers these discrepancies. The regional distribution of 1,994 penny errors is another interesting aspect to consider, because errors were often caught and removed from production relatively quickly. Error coins from a particular die pair might be concentrated in a specific geographic region where those coins were initially distributed, creating regional scarcity patterns where certain errors are well known and actively sought in some parts of the country but virtually unknown in others. This geographic variation adds another layer of complexity to the market and creates opportunities for collectors who are willing to search in less picked-over regions or who maintain connections with dealers and collectors across different areas. The insurance and security considerations for valuable 1994 penny collections deserve serious attention, because even though individual coins might be small and easily overlooked, a collection of high-grade 1994 errors could easily be worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, requiring specialized insurance coverage, secure storage, and careful inventory management. Collectors need to maintain detailed records including photographs, grading certificates, and purchase documentation, both for insurance purposes and for eventual resale, because provenance and documentation add value and buyer confidence when it comes time to sell. The long-term preservation of 1994 pennies requires attention to environmental factors including temperature, humidity, and air quality. Copper-plated zinc coins are susceptible to corrosion if stored in less than ideal conditions, and once corrosion starts it can progress rapidly and irreversibly, potentially destroying significant value in a matter of months or years. Serious collectors invest in proper storage materials including inert plastic holders, silica gel packets to control humidity, and climate-controlled storage environments to ensure their coins remain in pristine condition indefinitely. The networking opportunities available through 1994 penny collecting are substantial, with specialized clubs, internet forums, social media groups, and regional shows bringing together collectors who share this specific interest. These connections not only make collecting more enjoyable through social interaction and shared enthusiasm, but they also create practical benefits including access to off-market buying and selling opportunities, collaborative research projects, and mentorship from experienced collectors who can help newcomers avoid costly mistakes and focus their efforts on the most rewarding aspects of the hobby. Remember, we're about to explore our final coin, and I promise you it's going to be absolutely spectacular, so stay tuned for the grand finale.